Thank you, John. Thank you. I'm privileged to be part of one of the few panels at this conference which has women on it. So this is a special honor. Let me also try to answer the question that we've been set. Who is managing international security? And I think the answer to that is obvious. I join François in saying no one on a predictable or consistent basis in a strategic environment which is in such flux and where we're seeing the diffusion of power among states and away from states. And in fact, some argue that power itself is becoming feeble and weaker and fragmented, transient, and harder to exercise because the environment in which we live has seen the emergence of various kinds of players that are challenging traditional power holders. So much harder to achieve outcomes, we know that, and we've had a discussion all day about this. But there is also no consensus on how to manage international security. I think we have been obviously disappointed that multilateral structures that François also referred to have not lived up to the expectations that we all had over the last half a century. Neither have regional organizations in the security area. Both global and regional organizations have depended for their effectiveness on the power of one or more component states. And the UN Security Council is, of course, the closest that the international community has come to an effective multilateral instrument for managing global security. I would also say that, what François said, I would endorse that today we heard the US President say that the United States no longer plays the role of a global policeman. We also see ad hoc responses varying from case to case on issues of international security. But we also know that the challenges of international security today are much more complex as we live in a very interdependent and interconnected world. The old challenges persist. We have internal and interstate conflicts. We have competition for scarce and strategic resources, poverty, cultural, religious, and ethnic animosities. But new challenges have also emerged from non-state actors not subject to any rules, but with major influence and impact on intrastate and interstate relations. And of course, we've heard plenty of discussion this morning on weapons of mass destruction. Poverty, concentration of poverty also continues to pose a major challenge to international security. So no one state or group of states can manage these complex and multiple challenges and threats to international security on their own. That is obvious. The only solutions I would submit to you are multilateral. These are more difficult, they're cumbersome to achieve, they're slower, and they compel us to accommodate multiple interests, different cultures, different values, I would add. And it also requires us to utilize the best possible human and technical resources for this purpose. So I would say and argue that despite its shortcomings, the UN system still offers an umbrella to build and apply the multilateral processes needed to address the many component threats to international security. The UN's convening power is unique, and I don't need to go into how the UN Security Council still has the legitimacy to address almost all kinds of security threats, not all, but almost all. The actual negotiations and conflict management can be done through structures with variable political geometry, such as the Quartet for the Middle East, the Six-Party Forum for North Korea, and the P5+1 mechanism for talks with Iran. Now, of course, it is true that the complexity and diversity of the challenges, interests, and stakeholders involved today in the international security matrix, we know that solutions cannot be durable if they are the product of the use of force, especially the use of illegitimate force, which is beyond authorization or without the authorization of the UN and beyond international law. We must, in fact, recognize that military responses create more problems than the problems that they aim to resolve. And I think we also have to recognize today that solutions which are palpably unjust and unequal will also not endure. Increasingly, in our interdependent world, security can be managed by adherence to principles rather than power. Most of these principles have been prescribed in the UN Charter and other international instruments. They need now to be applied in practice. I think we also have come to a point where we must recognize that the security of some cannot be more important than the security of others, nor can it come at the expense of others. Exceptionalism is not the answer. Inclusion is the answer. So the transition to a more stable international order requires a rules-based system that produces solutions anchored in consensus, however difficult and hard that consensus making may be, and where the management of security is a shared, not a unilateral enterprise. I think the basic pillars of such an approach ought to include, and this is by no means a comprehensive menu of what I think should be principles that we ought to endorse, a renewed commitment to the non-use of force unless authorized by the United Nations, a renewed commitment to find multilateral solutions and not to circumvent international law, and I think a renewed commitment, as I am the voice from the South on this panel, a renewed commitment to the principle of non-interference. Finally, I would say that the aversion amongst Western publics to military intervention that we have seen so graphically demonstrated during the Syrian crisis has helped to align opinion in the Western world with opinion in the rest of the world. We, in the rest of the world, were always averse to the use of military force without the sanction of the United Nations. So the question that I want to pose to the question that I have been asked, does this alignment of public opinion between the West and the rest create a new multilateral moment? And can we seize this multilateral moment? Thank you.